And joining us now is Professor Jannie Rossouw. Thank you very much for joining us and welcome. You're the head of School for Economic and Business Science at WITS. And I'm sure that business is watching keenly developments taking place. The Rand stuttered a little bit because it was optimistic and then it sort of got a bit disappointed without the clarity. Is that the same feeling for business?
Good evening, Peter. Indeed. South Africa is in a constitutional crisis. Whether we want to know this or not, we are in uncharted waters. It seems at the moment that President Zuma is hanging in there to make sure that he clinches a nuclear deal that South Africa can obviously not afford. That would be very bad for the country's fiscal position and for business prospects in South Africa. President Zuma has reached the point where he cares for nobody but himself. And again, we are in a dangerous business environment as far as that's concerned. From the reaction of the Rand since the election of Mr. Ramaphosa, we can see that South Africa and South Africans are desperate for good news, and we all want to move past the Zuma administration. But it's difficult for business to plan in the midst of this uncertainty.
So the Secretary General has denied that that Mr. Zuma has made any demands other than just he wanted to introduce Cyril Ramaphosa to the BRICS presidents because President Zuma is chairing that BRICS gathering, and also to perhaps introduce him to SADC as well. So there was nothing beyond that he made demands on or that he wanted time for. So are we just speculating, or
at this point in time we know very little. Firstly, we have to say that Mr. Magashule's performance today made us long back to the previous Secretary General that could handle an audience and had good media conferences. The current Secretary General can really take a leaf from the book of the previous Secretary General of the ANC. Secondly, of course, in BRICS, the R stands for Russia. And that is where it is rumored that Mr. Zuma wants the nuclear deal. So surely he wants to go to BRICS, assert his authority, but it will give him the room to enter into a nuclear deal as President of South Africa that we should avert at all costs. And lastly, I'm sure Mr. Ramaphosa is a grown man. He can introduce himself at any international audience. We all know how well he handled himself in Davos, where he really did a lot of good for the South African economy, for the country's economic prospects. So in our economic setup at the moment, we're waiting for the new Ramaphosa dawn to take the country back to higher economic growth and to avert the fiscal cliff.
So now President Zuma says he's done nothing wrong. He says that he's not been found guilty of anything in a court of law, and he's always abided by party duties. So why would business be waiting for his exit? What is business so aggrieved by the Zuma administration?
Peter, Mr. Zuma's definition of having done nothing wrong clearly differs from my definition. If we just think about Nkandla, Mr. Zuma initially claimed he did nothing wrong, and the Interconstitutional Court called him to order, and then he said he had bad legal advice. But obviously he has done something wrong. He listened to bad legal advice. That in itself is a very serious charge against him. But the problem at the moment in South Africa is the whole issue of corruption, which has broken the golden trust triangle, as I call it, between government and the people and the government, but also people amongst themselves. Because at this point in time, people are scared to do business with one another because we do not know who's captured and who, if you do business with that person, will in the end reflect badly on your own business, where you run a good business, but by doing business with people who might be implicated in due course, business people are scared to invest, get partners, etc. So we desperately need to restore the golden triangle of trust, as I call it, under a Ramaphosa administration, also to make sure that the people trust the government again. So in Mr. Zuma's mind, he did nothing wrong. I beg to differ. If you can get him here, we would love to have a debate.
All right, so in a moment I'm going to ask you to give us what you think the attributes that Ramaphosa presidency might bring to South Africa, and particularly South African business. But first of all, I'm going to use an analogy that I heard an analyst use earlier on today, who said that you get a glass of water and you put a lemon inside that for a while. If you take the lemon out, it doesn't mean that the water rids itself of the taste of lemon. Could that be the same story in getting rid of President Jacob Zuma, in that it's the same party, it's the same people, you've just got rid of the lemon?
Well, you've heard the expression that the fish rots from the head. So by replacing the head, if that can usher in a new cabinet in which we have more confidence, there can be a fortuitous movement through the ANC as a movement, but it needs to start from the leadership. For one, Mr. Ramaphosa can replace cabinet ministers that are really not up to the job, that are really tainted by the whole saga, like Mr. Des van Rooyen, who it now seems lied to Parliament. Now, how can a cabinet minister really lie to Parliament, be implicated in a report by your public protector, and your president is even silent on that? So again, in his own mind, President Zuma has done nothing wrong. I beg to differ.
All right, so what attributes does future President Ramaphosa bring to the table that business has been waiting for?
Well, for one, he's not tainted by corruption. He's spoken very strongly against corruption. We've already seen action being taken against corruption even since his election as leader, president of the ANC. So he will rid ourselves from corruption. It seems that he will take action against incompetent and corrupt cabinet ministers, which will instill confidence and will restore the pride in South Africa. Under Zuma leadership, we are no longer proud of our country. We feel really ashamed sometimes to say, yes, this is our president, we are South Africans. Mr. Ramaphosa will be a figure that we can look up to, a person that we can be proud of, somebody that we can have confidence, and somebody that can lead South Africa to higher economic growth, which we really need, on the one hand, to avert the fiscal cliff, but on the other hand, to find jobs for our unemployed people who are in desperate need of a new future in South Africa. So he can lead South Africa to a new higher growth plateau. And because he comes without corruption from his past, he can instill that confidence in South Africans, and specifically in South African business people.
So, Deputy President Ramaphosa went to Davos with Team South Africa and made a lot of promises and laid out his plans for the country going forward. And it seemed to have been received quite well. The team came back saying that this was the best Davos that they had attended. So the question is, do you think that they did enough? And if we have a President Ramaphosa, that maybe credit ratings agencies like the Moody's of this world might actually give us a stay of execution?
Indeed. As we are desperate for a new future in South Africa, the rest of the world actually wants us to succeed. Because it's not nice to sit in any country and see another country going down the tubes. So the rest of the world has a big stake in South Africa. For one, Pretoria is the country after Washington with the most embassies and consulates. So there's a large international presence in South Africa. From that perspective, the rest of the world wants South Africa to succeed because we can be the gateway for investment into Africa. But then we must lead by example and set a good example for other African countries by not being corrupt, by having outstanding leadership, and by having a president acting in the best interests of the country. President Zuma has, since he became president, only acted in his own interests and only thought about what's it for him. We see it again. This is why he's prepared even to lead the ANC to break up just to protect his own position as president.
All right, we've run out of time, but in case I didn't get it, which you would like him to do tomorrow is resign.
Well, what's wrong with tonight, Peter?
Okay. Professor Jannie Rossouw, Head of School for Economic and Business School at WITS. Thanks very much for your time and your insights.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Always nice to see
right.
you, Peter.
Okay.